Welcome to the Opportunity Podcast, where entrepreneurs come to learn from real buyers, sellers, and industry experts on the lesser-known growth opportunities to build their online business empires. We'll uncover tactics veteran online business entrepreneurs have used to build, buy, flip, and sell their way towards personal wealth. Sit back, grab a coffee, and get ready to uncover hidden growth secrets. The Opportunity Podcast starts now.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Opportunity. Today I am talking to Chris Silvestri from Conversion Alchemy. And yes, I did butcher his name and I will butcher it again on the actual episode when we start, unfortunately. So Chris, really cool guy. He runs a copywriting agency that helps SaaS founders convert their traffic into more customers. And we had a pretty cool conversation here about the concept of use cases, brand positioning, and what that means. And also a pretty cool rabbit hole where we went down on when you're a smaller company, it's best to narrow that positioning more because by being more specific, you're going to most likely increase your conversions. And only later on, as you grow bigger and bigger, that you can help those other bigger use cases should you expand that positioning. So that's something that Chris and I talk about. Also, when should you do positioning? How often should you do it? And a lot about customer research, because as he says, usually you don't have a product problem, you have an audience problem. So with that said, let's dive into this episode. I'll see you on the other side. Hey everyone, I have Chris Silvestri. Is that how I pronounce your last name, Chris? Silvestri?
Silvestri, yeah, but the American way is fine. Silvestri.
Close enough, but good enough. It will be in the show notes.
Yeah.
I have already introduced you earlier because I always record the intros after the episode is done. But for our audience out there who is not familiar with you, first off, introduce yourself, who you are, and where you are in the world right now.
Yeah, so my name is Chris. I'm a copywriter and I also do a bit of UX design. I play drums, play basketball, I have lots of tattoos, and now I live in the UK since 2018 when I moved from Italy.
Excellent. And if the audience has listened to our past episode that's coming out or should be out by the time this is out, you are the twin brother of another guest of mine. As I found out on the plot twist there, did you guys go into business together? Like, tell me about your entrepreneurial journey.
We used to work at the same job. We had different skill set, but we worked at the same company for 10 years in Italy. And then we basically decided just to leave that company. We started studying what we do now on the side, weekends, and started doing it like on freelance websites. So yeah, we decided to jump ship and moved from Italy, leave our job, and kind of start a new life. And he went on the SEO link building side, and I went with the copywriting side. So yeah, two different businesses, but in the same niche, same market for SaaS. So yeah.
That's cool. I feel like I might be the third unrelated brother. How I got started was copywriting and SEO.
Ah, nice. So you have both skills. That's awesome.
Yeah. I would say I'm probably a better copywriter nowadays than SEO. I've never been like a technical wizard, but yeah, that's how I got started. I did a ton of freelance writing. Like when I was doing the oil field, I was writing like 1 cent per word articles for private blog network articles way back in the day. Yeah.
I did that as well, some like blog writing, but I always try to, like when I realized what like sales copy was, like the more short, concise copy, the closer to the sale, I realized that the more copy is close to the sale, the more clients pay you. That's why I decided to go with the actual conversion copy rather than like blog writing.
Yeah, it's a good move. I think there is money to be made as a blog writer, but there is wealth to be made as a copywriter. So that transition is huge. Like I always approached every blog post with a bit of copywriting in it, of course. But yeah, writing the actual direct sales kind of sales letters that we see, whether it's SaaS or DDC, always going to you always pay more usually. Before we get into like all the questions here, tell me a bit about Conversion Alchemy. So was that the business you start when you left Italy, or how did it all come about? And explain what it is too for the audience.
Yeah, so Conversion Alchemy, it's a small agency. We basically combine copywriting and some elements of user experience design. And the reason it's because I started out as just a conversion copywriter back in 2017. And I was working still already with SaaS and e-commerce. But then I worked 2 years with an agency, and we used to do like anything from like research, copywriting, design, branding. But at the agency, I was more into the UX design role. And that's also because we then transitioned into a usability testing startup. And I'm going to plug it now, which is Conversion Crimes, the usability testing startup name. So I used to work at Zeta Labs, which was the agency. And then we transitioned into Conversion Crimes. So I kind of helped them build the first processes, the first systems that we had, the platform. And that's where I basically learned all about UX design. I watched probably hundreds and hundreds of usability testing videos. So what I'm doing now with Conversion Alchemy since a year and a half now, I went back on my own and I combining copywriting with the elements of user experience design that I think really help increase conversions for my clients.
Those two are a good marriage for sure. Let's dig into what you've seen over your career here of what you're working on. So with SaaS, with software as a service, obviously we speak to a lot like content site owners, e-commerce store owners about their version of CRO. But in terms of a SaaS product and a SaaS business model, what are some of the unique challenges you face when you're doing copywriting for a software?
Yeah, I think there are three main challenges, especially if you compare it to content sites. But mostly SaaS, it's a lot about the customer journey and the post purchase experience as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces that you have to consider, everything that goes into the customer landing, the prospect landing on the website, understanding how your product works, and then signing up. If you have a trial, that's even more complex. You have an entirely different experience before them paying. So there's a lot of moving parts. So this is one, probably the main challenges for these kinds of businesses. The other one, in SaaS especially, there are a lot of different buyers and use cases, right? For each, especially in B2B. You can have the guy who basically signs the check. You can have the manager guy. You can have the daily user of the software. You have someone that sometimes influences the decisions only. So there's a lot of people involved and also a lot of use cases because your software can do 1,000 different things and you have to kind of be able to explain all of those on the website.
You made me think of something. Maybe you can actually comment on this. I think this is a trend, but I'm not sure. You're in the space, so maybe you know. But what you're saying there with the use cases, so if I have a software that say is like a content repurposing tool or something like that, like a Capwing, I could have multiple different use cases. So maybe your customer is just looking for like podcast editing, or maybe they're looking to make clips for social, but the software is the same for both of them, but you'd create like your own use case pages for each one of those use cases. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So basically, I can give you an example of a client that I'm working with now. So they sell this. It's pretty huge software. It's an intranet for big companies, for enterprise companies. And an intranet is basically the platform that a company uses to communicate inside the company. It's basically kind of like a social media plus archive of all the internal information plus connecting with colleagues. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use the software, and some companies go to them for one of those only. So they need to actually know all the features that go inside that specific use case mostly. It's important to give them context on everything else as well. But if you can have a dedicated page that goes inside that specific aspect, it's even better because you're speaking directly to their pains, to their motivations, to their goals. So that's usually a good way to go about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. From your experience, do you feel like SaaS owners struggle to identify these kind of use cases and their ideal customers?
For the use cases, I think they mostly have them narrowed down, especially because a lot of the clients that I work with, they know a lot about the product, they know everything. They're started with the product or they spent a lot of time on it, improving it. So that's not really a problem. The problem that I think is the biggest one is that they don't really understand their audience as well as they think they do. And some of the reasons are because a lot of these founders, as I mentioned, they started the company, so they built the product themselves, but they didn't really put much thought into how to go about presenting the product. And so they are immersed into the actual development, the actual building features. So they sell because they found their product market fit, but they realized that they lost touch with the audience. So that's one of the biggest problems.
So they don't understand the full breadth of their audience needs or what they can really solve because there's just like too deep in the product themselves usually.
Yeah. And there are some founders who scratch their own itch with the product. So they are basically their target audience. So in that case, they might know a bit more about the product. But the thing is, as the product grows, then their positioning changes. So then you have new challenges and new people that you're attracting to the product. So it's all things that if you don't run research on that, you kind of lose touch with it.
Let's talk about the research. Are there certain type of metrics you're doing or you're looking for, or certain types of research tools you're using when it comes to finding what these audiences want? Like, what's your process looking like that when you get hired by one of these SaaS companies?
Yeah. So actually, as far as like the process, I usually divide research into three areas just so that it clarifies it for the client, but it's also like a good think model to think about this stuff. And the first area is the internal research, which is basically I speak with the clients and their team. So I usually speak with sales, the product team, the support team, the founder. And that's mostly to understand, to get details on the brand, on the product, on their voice and tone, and so on. And that's something that they should do regularly, like inside the team, to reach agreement between them. The other area is the user research, which I usually divide into two separate areas, which one is the prospect side, which means people landing on the website, leads, people who are not yet customers, and then obviously the customer side. So that's the user research side. And then finally, the market research, which is basically looking at competitors, understanding how other people use their products. So looking at reviews, there's a lot of review sites like G2, Capterra, where you can actually go there and categorize different reviews for different products based on themes. So there's a lot of good stuff that you can get online if you do some mining. So these are the three kind of areas: internal research, user research, and market research. And this is the way that I go about it mostly.
And through those three buckets, you're looking for patterns and themes, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like for each one, usually the way that I categorize messaging when I go, for example, looking on a competitor's website, there are three areas again, which one is motivation. So what brings customers on the website, and is the company matching what they are actually, what they need, what they fear, and so on. And then you have value, which is the product. So the features, kind of the needs, are they presenting those well on the website? And finally, the kind of anxiety area, which is mostly about countering objections, instilling trust for people. So those three areas, motivation, value, and anxiety, is how I categorize themes.
Anxiety is a very important piece in marketing.
Yeah, exactly.
Show the fear, sell the courage.
Yeah, that's very powerful.
Speaking of like how you're presenting this on page, so let's say you did this research for a software company. What are the key stuff you're looking to do as far as copywriting and the UX elements? Like, what does every good SaaS site present in that front? Like, what should they have?
Yeah, first I would say, and it's a thing that a lot of company miss, it's a compelling value proposition that actually matches how they are positioning themselves. And value proposition, it's like a super complex kind of huge topic, but to simplify it, it's basically along with the positioning, it's basically telling people what you do, who you do it for, and how it's unique, how it works basically. So that how you should introduce the page. And that's a big area that I work on for SaaS. And then I would say another element that's really important, it's a clear description of what the product does and how it's divided. Like what are the kind of main areas or groups that the product is divided in, composed of, especially for like complex products like the one I mentioned before, the intranet platform. You have three main buckets that kind of reflect the use cases. So it's important to first, without going into the super nitty gritty details of each feature, on the homepage especially, it's important to present the main categories because visitors need to understand, okay, this is good for me, this is something that I need right now. Okay, then I can dig deeper into it. So a clear presentation of how the product is structured right away. The other one, as I mentioned before, are the dedicated features pages, the use case pages. Sometimes, especially in B2B, you could also have some persona pages. So you could have a different page for the manager, a different page for the daily user, a different page for the guy who makes the buying decision. And those are really helpful. And you can link to those from your product page or even from the homepage sometimes. So it's really important to consider those pages, but also the flow. So how people go through those pages from the homepage or from whatever they land on the website.
I'd imagine on the product page that you would have basically almost like a call to action for that specific type of person, like the person who's making the buying decision, like click here for that. Like, would you actually create like a compelling headline specifically for them to go then to use case page made just for them?
Yeah, exactly. That it basically matches like the person, the role that's visiting the page. They see that this page is about them and they should feel kind of like you're reading their minds and you're giving them exactly what they need with the exact specific use case. Maybe another powerful thing is sometimes hinting at the competitions of products that you know that they might be using already and you want them to switch from. So yeah, that's pretty powerful.
How big of a challenge is this for you, or how common is it to see a SaaS business that's basically saying just meaningless stuff all the time with corporate speak and techno babble? Do you come across that all the time?
A lot of recent clients, I have to say that they are pretty good. Like they're not that bad. Mostly super bad at that are the enterprise clients.
That's what I was getting at. Yes.
Yeah, they use a lot of jargon.
I was just in SaaStr in San Francisco, thousands of people, right? And then Inbound, the HubSpot event in Boston, I was just there as well. And man, some of the call to actions like on their booths were like, we are the best in class cloud server that does,
Oh my
X,
God.
Y, and Z. It's just like, I have no clue what you're talking about. There was this one
Seamless.
that, yes, it's seamless, seamlessly confusing. Oh, you will you just paid 30 grand for something you have no idea what this
Yeah.
thing is, right?
Oh man, there should be like a dictionary of enterprise jargon.
Right. Yeah, it's just so nutty. There was this one company, I won't call them out here because I feel kind of bad. They are a pretty cool company, but they have really awesome marketing. Like I never knew what they did. And then I finally found out what they did at HubSpot at the Inbound event because I just straight up asked them, like, what is it you guys do? I see you guys all the time. And it is just basically a better form of opting in and booking meetings. It's like, wait, it's like a super juiced up like monster opt-in.
So you actually looked at their website, but you didn't get it until you actually asked them?
I had no idea. I see their ads all the
Oh,
time.
wow.
They have really cool branding and they talk about cool stuff, but it's just like I never knew what they actually did because it's just like reeking in that enterprise speak that we were just talking about. That's why I asked you if it was common.
Yeah, so that's not really good feedback for them.
Yeah, great marketing, no idea what you're doing, but I like the content.
Yeah, at least the brand is present.
Yeah. So moving back to what you're doing for these clients, when you're identifying the positioning for these businesses, their market position, all that kind of stuff, is this like a one-off activity? Like, hey, I'm going to hire Conversion Alchemy, do this, and I never have to touch this again? Or is this something that you recommend people revisit?
Most of the times when I work with clients, especially like the smaller teams, they actually need help like narrowing it down for the first time because they don't really have anything. But a lot of other clients, for example, have already done the research by themselves. So they have a lot of stuff. They know their personas. So in that case, I kind of help them maybe make it a bit more crisp and clear. But as far as doing it after our project, I usually recommend at least like once a year, at least revisiting it, like running some research. And it doesn't have to be like months and months of research. At least speak with 10 customers and get some feedback on the current status of things. But usually, the other times when I would recommend clarifying your positioning is when you see, and again, here in this case, to have the kind of know your market and kind of follow it. Whenever a new competitor comes up that they maybe have a feature that's kind of a threat for a specific area of your business, in that case, I would recommend kind of revisiting your positioning and seeing if you can make it a bit more powerful, more differentiated. So those are the two cases regularly, at least once a year, just to check in on it. And the other times, yeah, whenever you feel that you're kind of threatened in the market.
Yeah, I like those. I like what you said at the beginning there, because I could see a SaaS founder trying to figure this out for themselves and like, well, I sell to entrepreneurs. Like, okay, like that's a big market, isn't it? Like, what do you mean? Like, trying to come up with what is your positioning there. And like you might have a software that every entrepreneur needs, but when you're first starting out, you need like the one that's going to lead to revenue quick. So is that something you think about too? Like you have 20 different audiences that could use this, but there's one that can really take off. Is that something you're doing with your research?
Yeah. Like whenever I narrow down like the target audience profile, the personas, I looked at a few things. So one is like obviously like the basic demographics. So you can look at gender, age, location, the traffic source, the user flow through the website. How they use the website is really important because I do some UX as well. So it's important for me to know, is the website used mostly on mobile or desktop? How do they go about converting? And then understanding the roles, as I mentioned, especially for B2B. The other area that I look for when narrowing down is kind of the psychographics. And that's understanding their level of awareness, sophistication, which is basically in simple terms is how much do they know about your product, about the market? What do they need to know to get like the highest level of awareness, which is most aware, which is they are aware of your product and they know that it's the right solution for them. So those two. The other thing that I look at, and this especially the UX side of things was really helpful for me, is understanding what types of decision makers they are and can kind of categorize them in either slow, fast decision makers, whether they click right away, whether they need more education, or do they pay attention on the page. And then you can have more emotional and more logical decision makers. And to understand this, what I do is kind of mixing in looking at user recordings. So I watch maybe like 50, 100 user recordings from software like Hotjar, where it shows you how people consume the content, where they click, how they click, if they go back and forth. You can kind of get an understanding of how they make decisions. And it doesn't mean making a buying decision. Even just clicking on a button, it's like a micro conversion for me. So I look at all of those. And lastly, obviously, there's the RFM, so recency, frequency, and monetary value, especially with the client. When I speak to them, I try to understand, okay, who are the people who buy most frequently? Who are the ones who bought the most like recently? And who are the ones who spend the most? And then we try to focus on those. Because otherwise, like if you look at the entire landscape and the entire audience, and especially if you have a lot of data to look at and you just jump into the data without a goal, without narrowing down, it's impossible. It's kind of like a mess.
Yeah. So this is unrelated to SaaS. Well, it's kind of related, but it's in a different industry. So I was talking to a few agency owner friends, and something they do, which I think is kind of in the same vein here, is like narrowing your focus to just like get closer to the revenue. So this is a random example because my friend runs an agency for dentists. I met him when I was in America on my conference tours, and instead of saying like, I will get you new leads for your like dental clinic, he said, I will get you 4-in-1 implants. I think that was the term. It's like an actual dental term. So
Yeah.
he's speaking their language and it's super
Yeah.
specific and it's a super profitable thing for them. Like, oh, this guy knows what I'm talking about, right? So it goes back to that mind reading thing you were talking about. Like it's often, once you figure out that the hard piece, it seems to me, is the research more so than the copywriting to figure out like, what is it do they really want? Because once you know that, like you can have like I've seen some ads that my friend was running to this, like they're not pretty, they are ugly. Like you would have a heart attack with your UX skills, I'm sure. And it works because you're speaking directly into that offer, right?
Yeah, there's probably an objection that some of my clients could have whenever we write copy that might appear to be a bit too specific, but that is actually on purpose. Like, so we are trying to filter out some people, and clients are always afraid of like, okay, people are gonna land on the website and they're gonna see this thing. It's not really right for them. Better, right? So we know that these people are coming. Let's attract the best ones and filter out the other ones because at the end of the day, otherwise you will just gonna have to filter them out in your sales demos or your other steps of the process. So better to let your website do that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Something I've done with my content team is when we get like customer support tickets, or if our sales team hears a certain complaint or certain question, it doesn't have to be a complaint, but a certain question over and over again, like let's create content around that. So now like the salesperson doesn't need to spend 20 minutes explaining this
Yeah,
one thing or
perfect.
answering the question, right? But yeah, that's specific stuff. It works in the SEO world too. Like if you go for like a keyword volume of 0, like most people don't go after it because
Mhm.
like, well, no one's searching it. But the fact that it showed up, that means people are searching it. So we have posts that get
Yeah.
very little views. I've led to millions in revenue because of that
Yeah.
little strategy. So I'm a fan of being specific.
I actually experimented with that, like a fun side project. I built this like a affiliate Amazon affiliate website around the electric skateboards that then I just sold last year or 2 years ago. But the nice thing is that I kind of learned, as you were mentioning, like being specific and writing some of the more niche stuff. So what I was doing was basically going on Google and searching for a term that I know was like searched for, and then I was adding kind of the whole alphabet next to it. So I was writing this term and then A and
Yes.
C, all the results they would give me, and then B, C, and D, and so on. And that was super helpful for giving me ideas on like articles that were super specific, not super long, but specific enough that people could answer their questions with.
Oh yeah, I love the Google Auto Suggest. I use different tools for that as well, and it just goes right into the thing that we're talking about when it comes to having that specific positioning and offering. So, with your experience, like talking to all these different SaaS owners and companies that you're working with, what are some of these common mistakes these people are making when it comes to their site copy?
As mentioned before, one of the major ones is not having like a clear value proposition. A lot of these people tend to be like watered down or using jargon doesn't really match how people speak. The other one is that they shy away from hinting at the competition, right? Because like you think maybe, oh no, I'm being too bold or too out there, like mentioning this competitor here or there. But apart from having dedicated like comparison pages, that really helps both on the SEO side, but also on actually educating people on how your product is different from the competitor. I think being a bit bold, and it doesn't have to be like spamming the competition. You can just be clear on what the differentiators are and why. You can even like praise your competitor, right? So you can say to people, this is why they are good, but we are better for this other use case or for this other feature and so on. So being a bit bold about that.
I like that. I think comparison pages are got to be one of the highest converting pages in B2B software. I mean, even in non B2B stuff, like you use them DDC, e-commerce, all sorts of stuff. I like what you said there about praising competitors because I feel like sometimes entrepreneurs like, no, let them all burn to the ground. There can only be one, right? But like even for us, like there's other brokers in the space and we don't match the use case of everyone, right? Like we're not the kind of guys who pretend to be investment tech bankers or something like that. We're more like the guys with you in the trenches. That's kind of more of our
Yeah,
positioning.
yeah.
So, and that's not cool with everyone. And hey, that's fine. Like I've recommended people to go to other brokers if they don't like us for whatever reason,
Yeah.
right? So definitely a room to praise as well as tell everyone why you're better at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Like when we speak of like Empire Flippers, especially, I think you guys are pretty clear about it, like with your branding and kind of your messaging. And that's one of the reasons why, like to sell my website, which wasn't really make that much money, I went with a competitor. And that's because you were clear enough for me to understand that, okay, your site is for like bigger companies making this much revenue. So yeah, that's basically what I mean. Like you were very clear about that, and that's good.
That's good to hear. That means I'm kicking you off this podcast for selling with my competitor, but that's good to know. Glad you I'm kidding. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we try to be clear because it's like what you said. You know, why would you want a website or a sales letter that doesn't qualify people before they get on the phone with your salespeople? I mean, that just seems like you should do that as
Exactly.
much as
Yeah,
possible.
extra
So,
work.
yeah, well, like you're just losing more money that way because you're just going to say no to this person anyhow, right? Is there any other common mistakes you see?
Yeah, I think another one, especially when it comes to their messaging, so that when they try to get to their messaging, then maybe they write a few pages by themselves. They kind of tend to forget about the context behind what they know about the customer. So they take stuff literally, basically. And there's one good quote that actually saved here, and it's from the book Alchemy by Rory Sutherland. And you can understand where I took the name Conversion Alchemy.
Yeah, I was about to ask.
I'm a huge fan of his, but he's kind of like a genius, I think, in like copywriting, advertising. And he says that many things which do not make sense in a logical context suddenly make perfect sense if you consider what they mean rather than what they are. And it's basically like the concept is okay, you hear a customer say this thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to like mirror it exactly on the website. You kind of have to understand the context of why did they say that thing, what are the deepest fears that they have. And my clients, like businesses who are not really like into nerding about psychology like I am.
But that's a marketer's curse.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't really pay attention to the stuff. They tend to stay a bit more like on a surface level. So yeah, context, it's really important, especially when
Yeah.
writing copy, I think.
I find people often don't go deep enough with their stuff. I think you agree with me based on what you just said there. But like, I have my team, whenever we're thinking about doing something, I call it the big filter. And so I have them ask, like, if I'm helping an entrepreneur, it doesn't have to be someone on my team because I get asked for advice now and again. And I would tell them, like, well, look, step one is who is your target market, audience research. Step two is what are you selling? And that's the literal what are you selling, which is like, and that's where most people stop. But step three is like, what are you really selling? And that's that emotional punchline, right? Like I call it the madman moment. If you ever watched the show Mad Men.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Oh, yeah, me too. I reference Mad Men all the time.
Yeah.
It's
Draper's badass.
Yeah. The most badass market on Madison Avenue.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you've said product problems are often audience problems in disguise. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so this came up especially because it happened quite a few times, but I have a vivid example that happened recently. Basically, so this client came to me like mentioning, okay, we want to like research what our audience needs because we think our product is not good. Like we have to know what we need to develop next. So yeah, run the research and tell us basically. So that's what they came to me with. But the problem is when I started researching their audience, is that I realized that what they were doing, they were attracting their own audience basically with their messaging, right? So they worrying about the product not being right for the wrong people. And that's a thing that happens often. So you have kind of the wrong messaging on your website and you tend to attract the wrong people. So you then it's kind of like a vicious cycle. You think you need to improve the product because you see that people are not reacting well, but you're actually attracting the wrong people. So you have to be clear first on who you want to attract and how you position your product to attract the right people. So that's what I meant basically.
That makes sense. So when you combine everything here with the copywriting, the audience research, the UX, are there any success stories you can share of like really cool upticks you've seen from applying all of this?
Upticks, I can share like specific metric, but usually like big ones that I saw were like in the 8-10% range. And it was pretty cool to see.
Is that 8-10% of like cold traffic converting to paid customer?
Yeah. Like landing on homepage basically and signing up for like a
Wow.
trial or buying the product. So that was really cool. But as far as other like examples of things that I consider success stories, even if it's not like specific metrics, like examples of like positioning, I helped this company, which is like a B2B, B2C SaaS, and they are in super scammy market, super kind of competitive, which is like social media services basically. And the challenge there, which I kind of loved, was helping them position in a way that at first they seemed legit, and also they talked about their product in a way that stands out from all the other kind of scammy competitors. That was really like a really interesting project. And another one, which a very good challenge, was trying to sell software to people who hate software. And what I mean by that is basically this B2B startup sold to kind of brick and mortar people. And they sold a software that replaced like spreadsheet, pen and paper. So you can imagine what kind of jump to do mentally to kind of accept, believe that the software can do what they are been doing for like decades without software. So that was really good, an interesting project.
All right. So my final question for you, with all that said, you yourself, you are a founder of your own agency, Conversion Alchemy. So tell me, what has been the toughest obstacles you faced when trying to build your own business from scratch? Did you run into similar issues as some of these SaaS clients of yours, or were you able to nail that customer research? Like, just tell me about the growth journey.
Yeah, I would say like one of the biggest challenges, even if like in a way smaller scale compared to my clients, it's probably being able to provide a good customer experience or client experience in my case. So from the moment that we start the project, especially with so many different activities, tasks they need to work on, kind of giving them like a unified experience in a way that they feel, okay, this guy is working on this project. I don't need to like chase him to get information. He's always in touch. This is the progress that we're doing. So that I try to pay a lot of attention to that, and that's probably comes from my like the user experience that I have. The other one, as far as like figuring out what types of customers, so far, honestly, I have to be grateful for this, but all of my clients basically came through referral. So I didn't really have to do much like outreach right now. So most of my clients find me through other people or they are referred from like my past clients. So far it's been a very good mix of smaller companies, like maybe solo founders, so they have a small team of like 5 to 10 people, and a couple big ones, like the one I'm working now, it's 100 plus people. But yeah, as far as these two groups, I'm learning a bit more as I go. And as I mentioned, it's not been that long that I've been having this agency. It's been a year and a half now. So just been focusing on like doing good work, offering a good experience, and creating relationships.
That's awesome. Referrals speak for themselves on the work. I was trying to say
Yeah,
something
exactly.
witty there. It didn't happen. So we're at the end of the interview here, Chris. So now it is time for the hardest section of the interview, the rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yeah, ready.
All right. All right. So what are the best hidden growth opportunities today in conversion optimization?
More than an opportunity, I would say that this is an opportunity in the way that my clients approach their audience and the data. So I would think rather than just jumping to or collecting data or improving your product randomly or just guessing, I usually categorize into three priorities. The first one is first fix what's broken, then adjust what's not resonating, and then add what's missing. The kind of like three priorities that you should follow to understand how you can go about stuff in a more like optimized way. Especially for understanding what's broken, I always recommend one opportunity, like kind of hidden secret in the industry that I don't think a lot of companies use, usability testing. And I know because I watch hundreds of videos, but watching a couple usability testing videos, especially if you watch them remote, but doing them in person as well, especially with your target audience, can give you probably like 60-70% of the stuff that's broken on your funnel or on your website or your conversion flow. And that reduces a lot of the things that you would have to look at, right? So it makes things faster and focuses you on the things that you need to change.
Makes sense. I like that framework. It's good. What tools or resources can SaaS entrepreneurs use to improve their conversion rates?
The ones that I always have my clients use on our projects are Hotjar is a big one. Basically lets you look at user recordings, so people using your website, showing you where they click. But it also gives you heat maps, so you can see how far down the page people scroll. You can see where they move the mouse, so maybe they don't understand some copy, and you can see what's not clear. But I also run surveys with Hotjar, so website surveys, those surveys that you see popping up like in the corner of a website and asking a couple of questions, not too many, maybe like 3-4 questions. It's kind of surprising to see how well they work. Maybe it's a bit harder in B2B, but usually, typically, if you ask 2 or 3 questions and very specific questions, I see a lot of results from those to understand, especially who visitors are. The other one would probably plug conversion crimes user testing if people want to check it out and run some user testing. Another one that I use is for recording interviews that gives you like an easy way to record interviews and video, audio, and transcribes. It's Fathom, which right now is also free, which is great. And I think it's really helpful for recording transcripts and analyzing later. And then other resources could probably be some places where I studied, where I learned this stuff. So Copy Hackers is a big one for copywriting.
I'm a fan of copy hackers.
There are a lot of resources. Another one for UX, user experience design, it's the NN group, so Nielsen Norman Group. They have a lot of articles, guides, but also do teach courses in person and online courses. Another one that not a lot of people know, I think it's the MacLab Institute. It's a guy that's been studying conversion rate optimization for like 30 years. And it's kind of like a philosopher of conversion rate optimization, which I kind of like. It's a very interesting look at this stuff. And he's got a very unique perspective, which I tend to find very memorable. So it's got a lot of useful models that you can think about for research, for conversions. So yeah, these are pretty much the ones that I always go back to.
Those are all great resources. We'll link them in the show notes. So my final question for you, and perhaps the hardest question, is what has been your funniest moment in working in the online world?
I would say the funniest moment, and it's probably due to the nature of the products, happened with e-commerce clients rather than SaaS. And the one that I vividly remember is this client who sells used golf balls.
Use golf balls.
And it's a huge market because if you think about it, like golfers play, like their balls end up maybe at the bottom of a pond or like in woods. And so what they do is basically they have people who collect all these balls and they sell them at like half the price. And these balls are quite expensive, right? So when you sell them half the price, that's what a lot of non-professional golfers use. And yeah, his business was like booming. But the funny thing
Wow.
about that is when I went to write their emails, so what I did was basically researching in forums because golfers especially use a very vivid language, very unique language that I had no idea about, so very specific terms. So I went scouring in forums, communities, and you can imagine like 80, 60, 70% of the emails started with the word ball as a subject line, so mentioning like males in Italia in the emails. But that was also fun because the e-commerce brand was kind of like a fun brand, so it was all good and aligned with the brand. But yeah, it was really a fun project.
That's funny. The internet never ceases to amaze me at what super
Yeah,
niche business you can make that could be
exactly.
sometimes wildly profitable. It's just like, what? How does that make money?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure having you on, Chris. For anyone that wants to get in touch with you and your team at Conversion Alchemy, what's the best place to contact you?
Yeah, so you can go on conversionalchemy.net, and they also write a newsletter, like a daily newsletter from Monday to Friday. So you can find that on conversionalchemy.net/newsletter.
Awesome. We'll put those in the show note as well. Thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you again for having me.
There you have it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it got you inspired at all the different things that are happening in this industry. And of course, if you just want to buy a highly profitable business, you can always go to empireflippers.com/marketplace, or maybe you want to make an exit of your highly profitable business, and you could go to empireflippers.com/sell your site. I've been your host, Greg. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review, give us a like, a follow, share it across social media. Talk to you all soon. See you on the next episode.